freight efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
Here in episode 32, I'm joined by Gary Gaussoin. He's president and chairman of Silver Eagle Manufacturing, where we talk about his role in founding NACFE, his family's involvement as an early innovator in the trucking industry, and the importance of knowing what you are and are not capable of doing. We also explore the opportunities for improved freight efficiency with doubles and triples, the importance of doing things that make economic sense, and we close where we discuss Silver Eagle's last mile delivery vehicle. It's based off an electric bike. Today we have joining us Gary Gaussoin. He's the president and chairman at Silver Eagle Manufacturing Company. Thanks for joining us today, Gary.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for having me.
How did we become friends? Do you remember the moment we met?
It was in Denver at this really fun hotel, the Curtis. And it was a great place to be creative because the hotel was just creative. Rocky Mountain Institute really understood this, and they brought a lot of people together. And I was actually brought in because we were a converter dolly manufacturer.
You then joined the first NACFE board of directors. So how did the idea for NACFE come about in that workshop?
So Amy Lovins, really smart guy, is the founder of, or co-founder of RMI. And they wanted to start freight efficiency. And they've had this transformational idea, how you transform trucking to be more fuel efficient. And matter of fact, fuel efficiency was a big subject versus fuel economy, because people like Frito-Lay are light loads and they cube out, right? And then other people that run heavy. So we finally got around, that's where we really built up the word efficiency instead of economy. But people were having a hard time adopting anything. We were doing aerodynamic devices and it was kind of viewed as snake oil. And there was some snake oil out there. And Andrew Smith from AT Dynamics was really frustrated. He was used to a faster moving pace and he'd invested in this company and bought the rights. And so it was clear that people resisted change. Trucking changes so much faster now, but resisted change because it's a very competitive industry and low margins. So the issue came around to how do you speed up adoption of things? And it kind of boiled down to trust. And so we came up with this idea that we needed a trusted source. And I compared it to consumer reports. You know, if consumer reports on something, I think most of us kind of believe it. And we said, how could we become consumer reports like for the trucking industry? And from that, RMI was generous enough to help get us started. And Hiroko, who of course you know, really helped rope it together and pulled us interested parties who wanted to move forward on it. And before the year was up, that was 2009, we'd started an organization.
Tell us about yourself and, the start of Silver Eagle. I think, you have a long history in trucking, even your father, if I remember right, but take us through just
Sure.
How did this career of yours start? And then take us all the way up to, what really Silver Eagle does even today.
Okay. Yeah. So I was born into a trucking family, and interestingly enough, my mother's father was railroad. He was a railroad engineer. Now I live near tracks where he used to run. But anyway, so Dad grew up in Idaho and was very inventive, very mechanical. And even at age 14, he'd invented a new clutch for the farm tractor. And engineers from General Motors came out to Idaho, near Boise, it was Tampa, Idaho, to see what this kid had done. And so Dad decided engineering was a good path for him. So he was going to school in Idaho and working in a truck dealership, and it was the Depression, and the truck dealership went bankrupt. And for back wages, they gave Dad an old truck, and it was a Rio Speedwagon. So when you hear of REO Speedwagon, it's really named after an old truck. So he started hauling honey from Idaho down to California and peddle it. Dad was pretty charismatic, and he'd buy California produce, take it back to Idaho, and of course, roads were really horrible in that 2930 era. And so eventually he had another driver, and the guy wrecked it. And Dad thought this is just too much work, and he'd heard there was a need to haul petroleum out here in the Portland, Oregon area. So he borrowed money from his future father-in-law and came out here to to Portland and opened up an Oregon corporation. And he named it Silver Eagle in 1933. And the reason he chose Silver Eagle is because that was the name he'd given the Rio Speedwagon. So it was petroleum hauling, and it was straight truck and full trailer. Full trailer has a permanent fifth wheel on the front axle, not like a semi trailer where it disconnects. But you still see a lot of rigs like that, particularly here in the West. So he was growing the fleet and had drivers and hauling petroleum and up the Columbia River Gorge. Columbia River is like the third biggest river here in the U.S., separates Oregon and Washington. And there was an accident, and the truck and trailer rolled down the hill and everything burned up, gasoline, fire, including the driver. And Dad fell because the rear trailer off tracked. So he decided to invent a better suspension and did it for his own truck safety. And people liked it. So we were in the manufacturing business. So we started manufacturing in 1936, and everything was just under Silver Eagle Company. And as my older brothers, who are 18 and 20 years older than me, came into the business, we converted to dry freight because the petroleum business wasn't doing well for us. There were a lot of pipelines. And then we started making converter dollies, which we're really known for nowadays. And in 1969, we separated the companies. And so I grew up around lots of innovation.
We call, adoption curves. We talk about all the time at NACFE, where you've got the, really the innovators, the early adopters, and then early majority, later majority, and laggards. And there's a key difference, that we keep learning here at NACFE around, and me personally, I guess, on what motivates innovators, and then the sort of the early business adopters and so forth. And we're all about trying to just, at NACFE, even like when you were talking about the origins of us, how do we get these efficiency things through that adoption curve, fast. There are a lot of businesses that have failed because they couldn't get out of the innovation piece, and they couldn't get to scale with products. I mean, do you have a few products at Silver Eagle that have allowed you to scale it and still be innovative while you're actually selling stuff, right? I mean, that's what's needed to maintain a business.
Yeah, I'd say the two big core products are converter dollies, and our military trailer. As a way to keep inventing stuff, we took on project to make a special trailer dedicated to the Humvee in 1986, because we had one of my brother's neighbors had said there was a need for that, because the old trailers for the Jeeps were too narrow and the Humvee is wide, it's 7 feet wide, and they just flip over. And we thought, well, that's about the size of a converter dolly and has axle, tires, wheels, brakes, electrical system, and we should be able to tackle that. And people told us it would be patient, and boy, we didn't know it was like the patience of Job. But by 93, they finally came out, TACOM, the Tank Automotive Command. Now it's Tank Automotive and Armaments Command in Warren, Michigan. Came out with solicitation for $7,500, and it was supposed to be a commercial off-the-shelf deal, because I don't think we ever would have gotten into it if it was full military specs. But sure enough, full military specs. So we teamed up with a company out of Richardson, Texas. So that was kind of part of knowing what you can do and can't do. And so they were the prime, and we were the manufacturer. And this factory we're in today is the one we set up for that, converted a beer warehouse in like 5 months. And product innovation is hard. It really is, because if you're too early, people aren't ready for it, and you spend a bunch of money. And there's always something to learn. First to market is maybe not always the best position. It's
a core item that NACFE keeps working on: innovation to early adopters to early majority. I mean, that is such a, when that goes well, and there's education and belief and trust, like you talked about earlier, it's great. And then there's obviously many of these are very complex, difficult to understand. Customers are confused. And it can take a while. Do you mind if we get into dollies a bit and doubles and triples? Part of from a freight efficiency standpoint that you brought up earlier, it's not the miles per gallon, but it's how much freight you haul. So if we have a double 53s in Canada, or even double or triple 28s in the US, I mean, you're hauling a lot of freight. A lot more freight, and MPG goes down, but the
Yeah.
ton mile per gallons go up. And, many wonder why the U.S. seems to be behind much of the world in hauling, heavier and longer. And we don't need to get into a huge sort of political discussion here, but just walk us through sort of, I guess, how your dollies work to enable that. But then sort of what's sort of your thinking around do we have a missed opportunity here with freight efficiency and allowing doubles and triples in more places than they already are?
Most trailers are semi-trailers, right? They have a kingpin and you hook it onto the fifth wheel of the tractor. But if you want to put it in a second or third position, you need to convert that trailer or use a full trailer. But most people convert one of their standard trailers by putting a converter dolly under the second trailer, and then you hitch it onto the first trailer. And if you're going to pull triples, you do the same thing again. You have a converter dolly that holds up the front of the third trailer and it hooks to a hitch. So the interesting thing is the doubles and triples are sometimes called wiggle wagons, and they can, because they have a lot of articulation and you can do what's called crack the whip, and they are inherently less stable. But people change their behavior around the vehicles they drive. People drive a minivan differently than they drive a Corvette or a motorcycle. And that's kind of the misunderstanding in all of this, the change of behavior. And the net result tends to be, if you take a standard like 53 footer and get the statistics on it, and it's the baseline, you'll find that doubles tend to have about half of the incidents per million miles, and triples tend to have about a third. And those rules of thumb have really stuck around. And that's a big part of the missed opportunity, because there's a lack of understanding. And politically, people are afraid of trucks. When I grew up, the truck drivers were considered the heroes of the road. And of course, maybe I'm biased because I'm from a trucking family. But, they used to stop and help people. And then there were some movies like I remember this black and white one, I can't remember the name, where the truck's just following the mystery truck. You can't see the driver. And, we kind of allowed ourselves to get the bad name and lose the heroes of the highway. And so people are concerned about it. And here in Oregon, there was even a campaign by the railroads to try to kill triples, because Oregon was the strongest place and the longest place. And if they thought they could kill it here, then they could probably kill it around the nation, because the railroads viewed it as a competitive threat because of the efficiency of it. But anyway, my brother Ross, who was a ATA chairman in the 80s, he helped head up the campaign. UPS was a big contributor, and we hired public agency. And what we found is, once you pointed out to people, which is exactly what we talk about now, is if you allowed more trailers to be pulled by one unit, you would have less pollution, you would burn less fuel, and you would have less congestion. And that's something else people don't understand, because you have one driver making a decision to move like 3 trailers, right? Or at least double if it's a 53. Same goes with doubles.
Yeah, we got this. There's almost an irony in another phase of this whole topic, and that is autonomy. So,
yes,
we've got this, there's this new fantastic, innovation where we've got the idea of a driverless automated tractor trailer following a driven tractor trailer to save the, this, that, and the other, when ironically we've had for 50 years, as you mentioned, or more, the ability to haul 2 trailers with 1 tractor. So it seems a bit illogical.
Well, it is. It's an emotional deal. You mentioned autonomy. I look forward to that day just because of commuting. Portland, the traffic's pretty bad. Of course, it got good during the pandemic, but it's coming back. But you see, I'm a manufacturing guy, so I tend to think of flow. And I see these people darting in and out, and then people hit the brakes, and then you get the chain reaction. And, it's just so ineffective, people making these individual decisions. And then sometimes you find yourself passing that person that was ducking in and out, trying to beat everybody. It's I think autonomous vehicles could tone all that down by being connected. They aren't going to be texting and distracted by whatever. I think Google did some work. My son told me maybe 8 years ago or something, and thought there was no need for more highways if everybody was interconnected and working autonomously. In like LA, they thought they could take 5 times the traffic.
Man,
it was some crazy number, but even if it's wrong, say it's only 2.5 times. That's tremendous.
That is tremendous. So we So we've been talking for our time here about a lot of innovation that's hitting trucking. You got a new product, a delivery vehicle that you've developed. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a commercial electric cargo trike, and it can be fully electric or it can be pedal electric. Pedal electric means you got to have some input in the pedals as part of it. And we're modifying a product from Germany, a company called Riedel, who we set up our first license agreement in 2019. We started playing with e-bikes in 2015. And so it's really a last mile urban thing. And the product can either have modular boxes that come on and off, and like you can just wheel them into buildings, has a lift system built into it, or it can be fixed boxes. And we're pretty excited about that. But like we've talked, it's challenging. People don't know quite how to categorize it and make rules that fit for cargo, a bit like the efficiency thing we were talking about with triples. Because it needs more power than just a person going and getting their groceries. And sometimes there's power limitations and size limitations. So it's a challenge, but it's a worthy thing, I think.
Yeah. But we're also seeing, robots deliver pizzas on sidewalks or on streets. So that whole final mile is really fascinating. Looking forward to seeing more about that bike and where all that goes. It's very exciting that you're in that. You mentioned earlier about how trucking can be very, for good reason, very adverse to changes, because we've got, it's pretty, slim profit margins, and, the world expects us to get the freight there all the time. And so there's a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of technology coming, with electrification, hydrogen, automation, and all of that. And I do see a more willingness by the fleets and the manufacturers and others, and including just a societal acceptance of technology. From your chair, in this long history of innovation, how do you think the trucking industry, are we going to be able to deal with all this technology and do it in a good way, or are we going to crash and burn, or probably somewhere in the middle?
Well, usually things are always somewhere in the middle, right? But we have huge challenges ahead, and even, down to the grid, right? How are we going to power all this stuff if we're going to go all electric? That part of the discussion isn't covered enough. And I see you starting to talk that way. And at TMC, we're talking about technicians. I've been in shops, like a trailer facility, and demonstrating stuff on our T-Dolly. And I had some logic backwards. So I asked for a multimeter, and it was crickets. These guys didn't have multimeters in their toolbox. And so all this electrification and the proper technicians, that's going to be a challenge. Hopefully with electrical vehicles, we have more reliability. I've been toying with electric vehicles since I was a kid. We used to have an electric golf cart business. So it's funny how all these things start to blend together in your life and your career. And I don't know if you find it or it finds you, however that works. But it's going to be challenges, and it's going to be a bunch of ands instead of one thing or the other, instead of an or. And probably out of that, the mix, I read an article from Washington State University, and they talked about the minerals required to make batteries currently. And it was something like, if they tried to make the storage batteries and use all other forms of energy and get, like with solar and stuff, where you don't get constant through the day, there was only enough material in the world to supply half of Washington State's energy. That was shocking.
I think you're right. And I think, I also think or believe that, we're in some of the early stages of this. And so just the different battery chemistries that are coming, the different solutions that are emerging that are going to really happen fast. And, I'm pretty excited. And I think that we've turned in the last 10 years with technology, and it comes from being scared of it and reluctant to it. And I use technology in a kind of a really almost stupid general sense, but I think now we're really accepting it, and it's become much more. You use the proverbial cell phone example, right? I just trust it now. I don't need to worry about it being down or wrong, or I got to, I missed this update or that update. I mean, it just happens. And so I think we trust it more. And with that trust, I think the trucking industry is looking at, okay, well, how's this going to help me? Things like over the air programming or other things that maybe we would have looked at and said, oh boy, I don't know. And that probably going to be a lot of problems. Now we're looking at it and saying, well, it does this for me and that for me. How can I make it work? And I see that a lot.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think things like NACFE have helped that for the industry too, because you kind of say what works, and that starts to lower the risk of trying something new. And the more you have success with that, a bit like you talked about your cell phone, we all kind of gotten to where we rely on them. They're less glitchy than they used to be. And that's going to happen with any product. The more you put it out there and get feedback and try, and people figure things out, the reliability is going to go up. I mean, cars, tires. As a kid, we'd go on vacation and you'd get lots of flats, and you didn't dare pass a town where you could get the last flat fixed.
That's right. Yeah, that whole reliability of vehicles and durability of vehicles is just a phenomenal success that we've all contributed to. So, well, Gary, time always flies on these, and but this has been a lot of fun. I mean, congratulations on 80 years in the trucking industry, you and your family, and all what you brought. And then, and this discussion around innovation and technology has been really, really good. Any last quick advice for all of us out there trying to, move products from innovation to adoption?
Well, Amory Lovins gave me a great line. He worked at our table, which he didn't work with every table, so I felt kind of honored on that. But his approach at RMI was only do the things that make economic sense. If you're only doing it for green or goodness, it's hard to justify. But if you make it good economics, then it's easy to justify. And then you start to throw in, can I believe in it, and reliability, and it's a no-brainer. So if we try to focus on the things that make economic sense and don't waste our energy on things that just have other factors that you've got to work on, I think we'll be much more successful.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot, Gary. I appreciate you being with us, and best to you.
It's always good, Mike. I'll look forward to seeing you.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Rosen Friends.